Brilliant. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our Igel presentation, which chooses the subject of Standard Life, who is our customer, and our partnership with them, and how we have delivered some sort of IT solutions, and how they used our technology over the last couple of years to improve their end user compute delivery to their end users. My name is Trevor Phillips. I'm going to start with a brief intro, which is just going to talk about some of the challenges for the financial services companies in 2021 moving forwards. I'm then going to talk about who Igel is and what we actually do as a company, just very, very briefly, to put some framing around that. And then I'm going to kind of connect how Igel can actually help address some of those challenges that are faced by financial services companies moving forwards. So once I've done that, I'll then hand over to Jack, my colleague. Jack's going to talk specifically about Standard Life and how they use this technology and how they got the best out of it. In terms of this presentation, don't worry, I'm absolutely not going to read things that are on this slide. That was not the point. I'll try to get as many words on one slide as I could. I think I'm going to win the day with that one. In terms of doing this presentation, I decided to do a bit of research and look at what some of the advisory companies are talking about financial services. So technology companies have a bad habit of assuming that they know what the challenges are, and this was more a research-born activity. I actually used Grant Thornton, was the one that I settled on, but I could have used EY or Accenture or Deloitte. Everybody has kind of similar themes to what they're seeing as challenges for financial services companies, and I'm just going to pick out three of them to talk about. I'm going to avoid the obvious ones as well. So the obvious ones are sort of like building resilience and hybrid working. These are all very fashionable, because of what we've been through. I think it's very popular. I'm actually going to be a bit more sort of generic. The Grant Thornton opinion on it was actually had a banking link to it, so I tried to be a bit more generic in my thoughts. So the first one that I picked on was accelerating cost reduction and restructuring. This is a challenge that applies to every single business. There's a quote there from the guy that's father of the Toyota production line: costs exist to be reduced. So we all know this. As a financial services company, sales have to be increased, costs have to be reduced by the same time. It's the yin and yang of business, right? And as Grant Thornton is saying here, that basically, because of what we've been through over the last couple of years, there's going to have to be a new focus on cost reduction, because we've had to change the way in which we work, and that has resulted in some expenditure which has been very good for the short term, but it now needs to be analysed to make sure that it's the correct thing for the long term. So that's one of the challenges that are faced by financial services companies. The second subject that I thought was interesting was this reprioritising regulatory and compliance initiatives. Now, that's an odd one for a guy from a vendor of an IT company to pick on. But the particular thing about the regulatory requirements are the same thing again. Last couple of years, we've had a bit more focus on other stuff. We've had other stuff to deal with. But coming through 2021, as we move out of that, there's going to have to be a new focus on that. The bit that I'm sort of, and Grant Thornton mentioned this in their passage, is cybersecurity. So whilst Igel isn't a security company de facto, we do help in that business challenge, and cybersecurity really underpins the regulatory and compliance data and information that you hold. There's not a company that isn't threatened by a ransomware attack, and it's very much at the human end of the spectrum, whether particularly customers, but certainly internal employees. We need to have very robust systems in place to make sure that we protect the data, because if we lose the data, the regulators come down on us like a ton of bricks, and the challenge faced. The final challenge that I just wanted to briefly talk about was the ESG one, the environmental and social governance that every company has got to attend to. Obviously, in financial services, this is at least a double-edged sword, if not more, because you have obviously the ethical investing, environmentally friendly investing channel. I'm not really talking about that or focusing on that. I'm more looking at the operational side of running a financial services company, and what the cost and the impact could be to the environment. So, but again, these things are coming back very heavily onto the agenda. If we all remember, I think in 2019, I would have said Greta Thunberg, and everyone would have nodded, and it was sort of her year for being very much centre stage and bringing that environmental message into the forefront of the media. But of course, that absolutely was dropped off the key agenda list just because of the last couple of years. So, 3 big challenges: cost reduction, cybersecurity, and environmental. These are all things that a financial services company in 2021 needs to be thinking about moving forwards. So Igel are a software company. We're headquartered in Bremen in Germany, and what we make is an edge operating system, which is a kind of an alternative to Windows, for example. Microsoft Windows is an operating system that everybody can kind of relate to. So we make a very, very lightweight Linux operating system, which can be used to connect to cloud workspaces. For anybody who doesn't know what a cloud workspace is, I'm talking about Citrix, VMware, Microsoft with WV, AVD, Amazon with workspaces, anywhere whereby we're using a virtual computer somewhere else. So often, a financial services company will use Windows on a device in front of a user, and then that Windows device will connect to a Citrix session, which will connect to another Windows session over here. And even as I say these words, they sound like a lot of layers of kind of, repeating ourselves over there. If I get hacked at the endpoint, then obviously I'm going to get hacked through the chain. So we make this very light endpoint, which can basically do a couple of things, which I'll talk about as we adjust the challenges, but basically give access to these workspace sessions. That operating system can obviously exist on all of your endpoints, and obviously needs therefore to do a bunch of other stuff. So there are your Citrix, VMware, and all those other kind of guys. But we need to have, communication and collaboration tools. This operating system needs to be able to do all of the Zoom and Teams and all of the remote meeting and working that we do at the moment. It needs to have all of the other security influxes like smart cards and biometric kind of inputs to it, so it can be unlocked and worked upon. And as you can see, this is just an example of, we're using our Igel Ready program. We have many, many companies that are household names and used by a lot of financial services companies already signed up to and part of our ecosystem. So very quickly, I'll go back to my 3 points and I'll talk about how Igel can help in those 3 points. So we talked about accelerating cost reduction and restructuring. So if you imagine a financial services company has 1,000 endpoints, they might be laptops, they might be thin clients, they might be desktop PCs, it could be any of the above. They're all running Windows and they're starting to come to the end of their life. So typically there will be a budget in place to replace those 1,000 endpoints. And the cost of that would be quite high, because it's not just the cost of buying new hardware, it's also the cost of deploying it, rolling it out, how much time it takes. Igel, what we can do is keep that hardware exactly as it is, just install Igel operating system on it, and you can extend the life of that hardware by 2 to 3, 3 to 5 years. And it will still enable you to be able to use the newer services that are offered, like Microsoft Teams. So even if it's old hardware, we can still leverage this old hardware and use it in a much more efficient way, because we're a very lightweight operating system. There's another thing around this sort of cost reduction that we're kind of coming relevant for 2021 as well, is that you can't buy new endpoints because there's a chip shortage everywhere. So when I say you can't, you obviously can, but we all know how supply and demand works. So, with a lack of supply, increased demand, price goes upwards. So it's becoming even more relevant to try and sort of save this impact for money. This is just a picture example of it, but new hardware might cost 50 million, thousand, doesn't matter where your number is, but you can see it'll be a percentage lower to actually deploy it in an Igel hardware. So cost reduction, saving money, avoiding supply chain issues. Again, we're prioritising regulatory and compliance initiatives. We're looking here at the sort of cybersecurity angle. This Igel operating system has never been hacked. It's a completely read-only system that sits in front of the user. The user can't write to it, they can't install anything on it, they can't do anything. It's completely locked, and all it will do is launch that user into the virtual workspace where they can do their work. And that's what gives them that kind of stepstone. So you go through a security barrier into a locked Igel OS, then into the virtual workspace. And that gives them the productivity that they want. It gives them the user friendliness, but without all of the risk involved at the endpoint level. My final piece, just to talk about, is the environmental and social government piece, how Igel can help in here. So typically when we look at these upgrade programs, and you can find a lot of information about this on the internet, companies are creating huge great pits of waste, whereby they're throwing in laptops and unused monitors and desktops and everything else. And this cycle is just going on and on and on and on. There's a huge pressure on companies to improve their behaviour in this area, and not just replace new with old. Igel, by extending the life of that endpoint, mean that they are obviously avoiding you having to drag new stuff out of the ground to make new products and thus chuck your old ones into the ground to replace them. So yes, we can help that environmental social area as well. So with that, just in quick recap, cost reduction, we can extend the life of endpoints, we can avoid the supply chain issue. Cybersecurity is a completely locked down endpoint, so it'll benefit to the financial services company. And then finally, we're helping the environment by prolonging the life of those endpoints and not needing new things. So with that, I'll pass over to Jack, who's a pre-sales engineer for us at Igel. He's been working with Standard Life for how long, Jack?
Thanks for that. I've been working with Standard Life ever since they first came to Igel to help them out with some of their business challenges. It's like 4 or 5 years ago. I've been with Igel myself 8.5 years now. So I think I'm pretty well versed in how Standard Life have done things. I'm kind of able to give you guys a bit of a brief overview on how they've evolved from our first initial contact with them to what they call their office in a box solution, which helped them out massively over the course of the last couple of years. So the initial requirement from the guys over at Standard Life was relatively simple. They literally just wanted something that was light and easy to manage that they could stick in a couple of their call center locations. They were running all their desktops and apps and things from a Citrix infrastructure, all running on that platform. And they had a couple of additional requirements on that, so that whatever was put in place needed to work well with their existing comm solution. In their case, it was using Cisco Jabber at the time. And because our OS already has all the optimization pieces for that and the full like day one releases of Citrix's clients, it fitted all the bills for them. So yeah, they implemented that. It worked quite well for them, and because it was working so well, they decided then to start trying to expand this into other areas of the business. So they then started sticking our operating system on some of their kit that was in their head offices. Again, a lot of their users are still connecting to their desktops and things through Citrix. So it worked very well, and they used not just Sky for Business from a unified comm piece, well, they use Sky for Business as well as a Cisco Jabber in various points. Again, we have all the optimization pieces for that. Everything works, everything offloads, everything gives a very good user experience at the end of the day. And it just saves them a lot of time and effort in terms of updating those endpoints and keeping them all secure, not having to deal with things like Microsoft Patch Tuesdays and having to disable features and things to keep everything working correctly. So yeah, that worked out quite well. And then from there was one more evolution in what they were doing before we get to their office in a box solution, which laid a very important bit of the groundwork for them for that to work seamlessly when in March they were forced to send everyone home from the offices, as a lot of companies were. And that came down to it's something we released called our UD Pocket device, small ruggedized USB stick that runs our operating system off of. You plug it into something and boot from it, and you don't touch anything that's on the internal storage. They realized that this was actually a great use, a pretty good use case for them with their DR suites. They don't own DR kit. They have a third party that runs that. And if they ever had to invoke a DR scenario, they'd have to call up that third party company, and they would have to, go around all these blank machines that are technically there for use with not only Standard Life, but other companies that may have invoked this. And it takes several hours to recruit every image of these with a full-blown Windows image. And then there's also you've got the upkeep of that image to factor into consideration as well. They've got to spend every couple of months minimum, you have to completely redo this image. You have to make sure all the latest Microsoft patches in, make sure your antivirus is up to date. If you've got clients on there that need to connect to your apps and desktops and things, they will need to be put in place and brought up to spec. If that DR suite then upgrades the endpoint devices that are sat there and upgrades those PCs, maybe you have to revisit again to put new drivers and things in there to make sure everything works seamlessly. So that, because the worst case scenario for that, if you did have to invoke a DR scenario, you don't want it to not work. So there's a lot of upkeep and maintenance involved in that. And our UD Pockets completely removed all of that challenge. Because using our management solution, you can manage an endpoint running the Igel operating system over just an internet connection. all they had to basically do was give this DR site a box full of our UniPocket devices, and then if they ever needed to invoke a DR, walk around the estate, plug in these UniPockets and boot the device, so it boots from the USB stick, and then it just talks back automatically to the management system. Any updates or config changes that have been made to the environment that need to be deployed down to that happen literally within a matter of a couple of minutes, and then everything's up and running and working. So instead of having to spend hours to invoke that, it can be done in a couple of minutes. And as part of them actually putting that solution in place, it meant that they had our Igel Cloud Gateway in place to enable them to manage everything over just an internet connection, which as soon as they suddenly had to send everyone home from work, was great. I mean, they had the capabilities already there, built in, ready to manage all of their anything running an Igel operating system from home instead of from their main head office. And we have a nice video from the guys over at Standard Life, which we'll run through now, which details exactly what they did, and it's certainly a very good solution they put in place for this. So I'll let the guys from Standard Life take over from that. And again, any questions you have about this, you want me to go into any more detail afterwards, let me know.
Standard Life Assurance is an office-based organisation with almost all our customer-facing operations teams working on-site using traditional desktop PCs. With the coronavirus pandemic, we had to find a solution to move the whole business exclusively to work from home. That's nearly 4,500 people, which was a massive challenge. Standard Life Assurance is a long-established expert in workplace pensions, personal pensions, long-term savings and retirement solutions. It was founded in 1825 based in Edinburgh. The business was acquired in 2018 by the Phoenix Group, which is Europe's largest life pensions consolidator, with over 14 million policies and £400 billion worth of assets under management.
The business impact of COVID was that without a working from home approach, our business would have ground to a halt and we would have been unable to service our customers. Customer service teams help our IFAs, individual customers and our corporate clients. They're the engine room of our business and deal with everything from investment queries to policy administration. Therefore, it was clear that we would have to move the business from office-based to home-based very quickly. We had about 1,200 laptops in business, but to cater for 4,500 staff, we reached out to our supplier, but with supply chains under pressure, we just couldn't buy any more. The big issue was what device to give staff and how we would manage that build, security and application delivery. Delivering a working from home solution threw up some surprising issues. Many people didn't have appropriate devices at home. It was clear that we had to provide a secure standard endpoint. This drove us to look elsewhere and how we could repurpose the existing estate of thousands of Dell PCs which were sitting idle in our office. Igel OS has allowed us to convert and repurpose our existing PCs and laptops into secure endpoints connecting to Citrix Workspace.
The goal was to provide a working from home solution for 4,500 staff, which enabled them to have a repurposed PC, 2 monitors, keyboard, mouse, Ethernet cable, and a headset so we could effectively support our customers. This quickly became known as an office in a box.
We have an underground car park at our office, which we turned into an office with the box drive-through. Staff came in one way in their cars, got their box, and drove out again. Other devices have also been shipped all around Edinburgh, the central belt of Scotland, and we've even catered for people living in the Highlands. We've now moved on to supply the brand new Igel VD3 as part of our office in the box. The smaller size, built-in Wi-Fi, and green energy efficient credentials have proven a popular and reliable option with our staff. Collaboration is key for us. In addition to providing access to applications, we've also been able to optimize the audio and video in our Skype for Business. This has been possible because Citrix HDX optimization is built into the Igel OS.
Igel OS has allowed us to repurpose unused PC equipment rather than buying hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of new laptop or PC hardware. The OPEX cost to deliver the solution is low, with many man-hours having been saved as it takes just 4 to 5 minutes to reflash each desktop, and then we were able to ship equipment to staff at home really quickly.
The whole idea behind delivering an Igel OS powered PC was simplicity. The staff don't have to think about loading Citrix onto the device, don't have to worry about what version of HDX optimization they've installed. simply turn on and they're presented with a familiar login screen. And Office in a Box kit will stay at staff homes. This means that regardless of whether they're working at home or in the office, they'll have the same simple user interface and access to their corporate applications.
I'm really proud of the working from home solution we put in place. Normal IT solutions would take many months. We would go through requirements, undertake operational and end user testing, revise things and test again. The bottom line is Office in a Box provided a production solution in days, not months. That's been due to the Igel OS and ease of management of the whole environment, as well as the dedication of our department and the logistics teams.
Okay, yeah, so that's the gist of what Standard Life did throughout the last couple of years when everyone had the interesting challenge of having to send the entire workforce from home. But yeah, is there any questions anyone has on any of this? Anything you'd like me to elaborate on how this worked for? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to read from Lloyd's Banking Group. I'm a data scientist there as well, so yeah, a nerdy one. Basically, most of what you presented is sort of related to people that were doing sort of call center sort of type stuff. Have you also used this for sort of people doing, say, data intensive stuff or coding and all that side of things as well?
Yeah, so because we connect and are fully featured in with pretty much anything in the VDI space, provided the infrastructure you've got in place or the cloud infrastructure that you're using has the capability to deploy those down, you can use all of that from our operating system. Yeah, because we have day one releases of things from Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, AVD. So any features that you would use from a normal device can be used from us. And then provided what you're trying to do, provided that's what you're pushing down, you can do it from our system. Okay, anything else from that?
We're also working even in trading environments, for example. So again, from a data point of view and the heaviness of the application having to process, that's all being taken care of in the cloud.
Sure.
The Igel piece is very much just one part of a story. It really is just kind of the human interface touch points, just keeping that bit secure, solid, and then all the magic will be happening in your sort of cloud environments and that kind of thing. So.
I sort of like the idea of, you save resources by not necessarily having to have a work laptop and a home laptop, but I guess if as a staff member, you probably also need to make sure that somebody isn't pressurised to use a home laptop to do their work stuff, because that means that they might end up buying a new home laptop that they didn't necessarily need. I guess that's a difficult one to sort of address. But
yeah, with the USB key that you can plug in, which will to a home laptop, any home laptop, not a new one, that abstracts the whole kind of operation of the system, of the underlying operating system. So from the user's point of view, they can have a laptop with a virus on it, or so this is completely abstracted from it, and literally the minute you pull the key out, the home laptop becomes the home laptop again. I'm describing something that's perfect, which isn't perfect, if you know what I mean. There's still quirks to that setup and scenario. Not all users are comfortable with plugging devices in, booting. It's a complex world that we live in. It's not as much of a panacea as I'm kind of suggesting it is, but it's certainly, as Standard Life kind of said, and I think, without being disingenuous, they need to take a lot of credit for the success of that program. I mean, they kind of say, it's all down to Igel. I mean, largely, it's all down to their hard work and their kind of operational nous and understanding ultimately what the customer needs. What does the customer need to see from our organisation? And you were right, that's an centre on call centre, but it could have been other aspects of a business needing to keep that running. They really thought about it cleverly and made sure that, because most financial institutions have always paid lip service to that working from home thing, because it was always something on the agenda, but we can push it back again and push it back a bit more. And even we've seen in the news, haven't we, with I think with Goldman Sachs CEO saying that we're going to have everybody back in the office by the end of September, whether they like it or not. There's all this kind of furore around that as to whether or not people should be allowed hybrid working as a kind of human right these days. But I guess these are mysteries that will unfold as we go. So hopefully that presentation has piqued some interest. Again, we think we've got a really strong story in cost saving, a very strong story in the repurposing of existing hardware, so an environmental sort of impact, supply chains are all broken because of the last couple of years. And obviously keeping things data secure is in our DNA and our heartbeat. So thanks again for your time and your questions. And with that, we'll wrap up, I believe.
Thank you. No worries.
Thank you, guys.
There's no other questions on that.
Okay.